Welcome to A Better Divorce podcast, where we have conversations about the emotional, financial, and legal issues that are on your mind or should be on your radar if your goal is to keep your divorce out of court. I'm collaborative divorce attorney and mediator Andrea Vacca, and I know that how you divorce matters to your long-term well-being. That's why it's my mission to help you have a better divorce with as little acrimony as possible, so that you can create the best life possible on the other side of your marriage. Hi, everyone. I'm your host, Andrea Vacca, and I'm very happy to welcome Brenda Bridges to the podcast today.
Thank you, Andrea. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, I am too. So, Brenda is the author of the book, Oh Shit, I'm Getting Divorced, The Guide to Keeping Your Dignity and Dollars. And she's not only a certified divorce financial analyst, but also a certified divorce coach and mediator. So, it's great to have you here, Brenda. You know, we know how many emotions are tied up in financial decision making. So I'm really excited to have our conversation. And just so you know, you are the first CDFA I've had on the podcast who's also a certified divorce coach. I don't run into a lot of those. So that's
No,
pretty cool.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
been, I think, a good balance at least
definitely.
for the clients I work with. So I love that you say, you know, how much emotion is tied up in the finance, because the idea between CDFA and CDC balancing one another is the CDFA part is the financial part, and the coaching part is let's acknowledge all of those emotions we're dealing with as you go through divorce to figure out how to make good financial decisions. So,
Exactly. You know, what does security mean to you? What do you really want? We're going to get a lot more into that. And I know you are divorced yourself, and you know, you've been working with men and women going through divorce. So using many different processes and, you know, mediation, collaboration, negotiation, litigation. I guess needless to say, you've learned a lot. You've learned a lot personally and professionally about the divorce process and how to have a better divorce. So I know one of the things that you tell people is how to prepare for divorce using what you call the 3 Ps and what
sure.
not to do first. You know what those 3 Ps are. So I would love to talk more about that because I really think it ties really well into both of your areas of expertise. So tell us more about the 3 Ps.
I would love to. So the 3 Ps were really born of the seeing what not to do part of the divorce process. And in my opinion, what not to do is run out and hire. In my opinion, what not to do first is run out and hire the first attorney that you talk to. And that might be a gut reaction. You know, you talk to your neighbor, your cousin, your aunt, and they had an attorney who did a splendid job for them. And I say this with the utmost respect for and admiration for attorneys. That might not be the right attorney for you. So I think back off the process a little bit. And 3 Ps would be first, figuring out what your purpose is. What is your goal? Where do you want to go with life after your divorce is done? And that then creates your kind of true north. And I really encourage people to dig deep in figuring that out. It's not just the surface. The first thing parents say to me, man, woman, doesn't matter, if they have kids who are minors who are going to be impacted by this divorce, is the kids are most important. The kids are most important. And that's wonderful. And there's more.
Right.
So what else is important in how your life is going to be down the road? What do you want to happen? What is important to you? Maybe looking at things that throughout your marriage you've set aside or given up that you really want to be able to focus on again. Do you need to change careers? Have you been working? Do you need additional training? Like the list goes on and on. But really to get clear on what you want your life to be like when the divorce is done.
Mm.
Getting divorced is important, but it's not your goal. Your goal is moving through the rest of your life.
Right.
So that's first P.
Okay.
Once you figure that out, then the next part is what process best suits that goal, your goals, because there are lots of different ways you can go about getting divorced. An attorney in court, as you well know, is not the only way. Like that's our soap opera version, or that's the TV version where you see, you know, lawyer up and then the lawyers are going to slug it out and they're going to win. And if someone wins, one always loses. But it's all going to be done in the court system. you can do a lot of divorce outside of the court system. And in my experience, the majority of people I meet and work with are able to come to their own decisions outside of court without letting a judge figure out what their financial and family future is going to be. So, is can you do a divorce? For some people who have maybe a very short-term marriage and no assets, things like that, it might be the best answer.
Mhm.
Mediation, there are different styles of mediation. Collaborative process, which you and I are both involved in and is growing, which I think is a really good thing, or litigation. But the process that best suits your goals, then I believe should drive the third P, and that is your professionals. You could also say your people.
Mhm.
Like, who's the team that best suits your goals and the process you want to follow? Who's going to walk you through this? And I believe if you follow that process, you're much less likely to have regrets or mistakes or oh, I should have. I've known people who were locked in with professionals that weren't a good match because they hired and gave that retainer to the first one they talked to.
Yeah.
And then 2, 3 months in, they're not feeling as though they don't match. They might not have their back. They might just work in a different way than is appropriate for the person going through the divorce process. So,
Okay, well, I let's dig a little bit more. So, what's your purpose? Just the three P's. What's your purpose? What process is best for you? And who are your people? Who is the attorney, the professionals you're hiring? And that would go to, I would imagine, your attorney as well as the other professionals that you put around you. Like, who do you need, right?
sure.
For your team. So let's talk a little bit more about your purpose, because
Mhm.
I think a lot of people they do that first answer that you said. Well, I want my kids to be okay. Great, we all want your kids to be okay. Of course, and I'm thrilled to hear that. And like you said, and what else? Like, what do you need to be to make sure your kids are okay? And we're looking long term, not just for their short, lives that they're living with you. When we were talking before the show, you had said, especially if it's a high stakes divorce, you need to start with what's your goal, what's your purpose,
Yeah.
what's the end look like for you, and high stakes. So let's define what that means to you. When you say high stakes, what does that mean?
I think high stakes can be financial, high net worth couple, but
Mhm.
it can also be time. What's the runway on the rest of your life? So if you're in your 20s or 30s and you're getting divorced, you have a lot of time to recover from that, family wise, financially in your life. You can have many different careers after that and so on. If you're in your 50s and 60s, you don't have as much time to recover either career wise, financially, socially, geographically, like so many things. Then your decisions, I believe, become really high stakes because it's hard to recoup or regroup after a mistake is made. Or if you make a spur of the moment decision, you could be paying for that literally and figuratively for quite some time.
Right, the rest of your life. Sometimes, yeah, the it looking forward to where you want to be, where you are now. Um, what's important to you, what your goals are. I always try to have those conversations with my clients in if they're in mediation or in the collaborative process. I don't try. I mean, it's what I do. Because before we can start negotiating and talking about how to divide assets, what do you need? How much longer can you earn this income? What does life look like? Where will you be living? Like, there's so many issues we have to look forward. So much about divorce, if you end up in court, is about the past. Who did
Right.
what to who? How much money did you earn? What was your marital lifestyle? Great.
Right.
Okay. But really, that's why no one's ever happy coming out of litigation, because it was
I,
all about the past and not
it's
really
the
focused on the
past.
future.
I agree. It's past or it's winning
Yeah, and no one
or it's
wins.
more.
Right.
And no one wins divorce, but I'll have people start out with, well, I want 52% of what and why.
Right.
So once we put context to things, 52% might not be enough. It might be twice as much as you need. We don't know until, as you said, and where you start with the goals. What are your needs? What's going to, at a basic level, maintain a standard of living where you can get by.
Mhm.
Because this is mostly a female thing, but a lot of women come into this process being afraid that they're going to be eating cat food and living out of a grocery cart. So we want to establish what you really do need. And then that gives you context for your purpose to figure out what is acceptable and what's not. And is there enough in the marital state to have both people come out as intact as possible on the other side of the divorce process?
It's funny. It's not funny. I do see a lot of women are really afraid of not having enough. And on the flip side, more often than not, it's men who will say in heterosexual relationships, especially, I've seen this. The men are like, "Oh, I'll make the money again. I can give." I have guilt. They give way too much,
Sure.
thinking they'll be able to get back to that level of income they had, or that deal will come through, or the market will change. Whatever it is, they have these unrealistic expectations just based on hope or pride or what, and a lot of it's driven by guilt, and then they give up too much and they're suffering. So I don't ever hear men thinking they're going to live under a bridge and eat cat food, but they do put themselves in situations where they're really on edge, and
Right.
that's another thing
Right.
we have to talk about. Like, we have to shine a real light on that. Like, you can't
Mhm.
give too much either. You have to ask for enough of what you want, but you can't. You have to keep what you need too. So
Yeah, I agree. And the more people are able to make this goal based and talk about needs versus winning or being future focused instead of guilt and blame, the more both parties, I believe, come out in a better place. And then by definition, their kids are going to be better off. So if you're going to take care of the kids, if you do put this in context and you do have discussions that are future focused, you are taking care of your kids.
that's right. Yep. You'll have the home that you want for them. You'll be able to give them to involve them in the activities that they want to be involved with. You'll be able to travel with them in the way that you want. There's so much that the children, need and will depend on your financial situation. Also, we talked about what used to bring you joy, and you had an example of something you gave up a lot of joy in your own marriage because it didn't. I don't know, for some reason we didn't get into the details, but it really
Yeah.
angered your husband to do something. But you gave, and so you encourage clients to really think about what do you no longer have that you would love to bring back to your life.
Right. What part of yourself did you put aside or lock away? What fell off during your marriage? My story, my thing was art. I come from a maker family. That is what I was raised to do. My siblings, we get together, we craft and make things now. It was a big part of my life and my identity. Like I would have a weekend free and I'd paint all the furniture. These were my things. It made my ex-husband nuts. It made him crazy. He couldn't stand it. So over the duration of our marriage, I would go from, painting in the spare room to painting in the basement to making sure he wasn't going to be there. Or I'd leave and go paint for one day a year at our lake house. Like and then I just put it away. Like it was no more. So it was really important to me moving on with life that I look at how do I bring that back into my life because it was such an important part. So for someone listening here, if you're embarking on the process or you're going through, if you do a little time soul searching and figuring out, like for me, maybe it was journaling or fishing or writing, whatever it was, what was your thing? Can you build that back in? Make that part of your goal, a part of your purpose, and see how it affects your decisions. See how it affects how you walk through the process because you're looking forward.
Right. That's it. So let's talk a little bit more about process. You mentioned the DIY process, the kitchen table divorce. Really sit down, try to negotiate the agreement. Maybe you even draft your own divorce papers, or you have all your terms worked out, and you go to a lawyer, and they can put everything together for you. But you and your spouse can easily settle things. It's not that common if you've been married more than a few years, if you have children, but people can do it. That's for sure.
But
Um, like, if it's not, the high stakes situation we were talking about, this is more low stakes, obviously. But when you're looking at process, what do you tell people if DIY is not going to be possible for you? What do you tell people to think about in order to choose the right process for them?
I really can talk through the different process options, and I look at it as least aggressive, least expensive, least advocated to most aggressive, most expensive, most advocated. And it is a spectrum. Where do they feel they can work through that, communicate with their spouse? Um, what are the things going on in their relationship that are going to impact this process? You know, if there's abuse, if someone is not able to speak up and advocate for themselves, mediation might not be their best course of action because by definition, the mediator is neutral. They're not going to tell you what to do. They're going to help you make decisions when you can't, but they're not going to say this thing is better or this thing is worse or that's a good deal. It's really you're on your own to process this information. So if one person in the relationship is always yes, okay, yes, and just agreeable, they might need someone who's going to advocate more like the collaborative process. So it's it's questions like, would you rather have someone else make a decision for you on your life and how it plays out, your children's life, your finances? That's a litigation situation. That's a judge. You're saying, I don't want to be part of this. I want someone else to listen to our fact pattern and decide.
Hmm.
Would you rather be in charge of your own schedule and budget and decisions? That's more mediation and collaborative. Would you rather have public records, litigation? Would you rather be private and out of court? That's mediation and collaborative. Would you rather have someone distill the information for you? Like maybe you weren't the one who did the finances in the family, and you really want someone on your team to say, this is what you have, this is what it means, this is what it's going to take for you to live on, like putting the numbers in context. Then you might want mediation that has a CDFA involved,
Yeah,
and you're both seeing the same things. Um, so it really is figuring out your relationship. What is your position? Like, what is your unique and individual status? And then what best suits it? You can always become more aggressive. It's very rare that you can walk it back.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yep. I always say divorce should be your last resort, not your first choice. You can always go to court if you need it, but let's try to find the process that seems to be the least adversarial, but the most structured and right for
Yep.
you with the right team around you, because it could be mediation with a CDFA. Love that process. I think it saves money. It gives them more security. They can meet with the CDFA and not have the mediator there necessarily and get the expertise at a lower hourly rate usually. I recommend that for a lot of my mediation clients with high net worths or good net worths that they have to think about. Okay, so that those are great tips for choosing the process. We've talked about them on the podcast before, but hearing it from somebody with your background, it just makes so much sense and holistically how to look at this. So let's think now about the people and the professionals, the third P. When you're ready to now say I'm going to choose collaborative. I think collaborative is a good process. I do want to make decisions for myself, but I do need an advocate. So let's just pick that one as an example. What?
I love that. And I think that's a really good example because that's where professional training really comes into effect because you might pick collaborative and then you're going to start interviewing team members and you're talking to attorneys and you talk to the first attorney and they say, well, I don't do collaborative. Okay, they're off the list. You want collaborative. You talk to the second attorney, they're collaboratively trained. They've done collaborative cases. They have a team and they can refer you to other coaches, CDFAs, attorneys, and so on. That's a good candidate in my mind. You go to a third attorney because you want to talk to a broad array of people. And the third attorney is like, yeah, I've heard that's good. I've never really done it, but yeah, sure, I can do it. It might be enticing. Maybe their hourly rate is lower. And that sounds like, oh, this would be like collaborative light. That'd be a good deal. But if that person isn't trained in it, they might have a lot of difficulty. And I've actually been in these positions where someone has engaged an attorney who says, yeah, I can do collaborative. I got this. But then what happens is you're sitting around the table and it ends up being a more traditional litigated style negotiation.
Right.
That's okay. What's your offer? What's your offer? And we lose sight of goals. And the whole story of collaborative is we're being goal based and future based. So if an attorney is trained to lose the vernacular like, oh, you're giving this up or you're winning this, it really makes a difference
Yes.
as opposed to, does this meet the goals that we talked about when we started this process? You said this was important. Is it still important? And does this decision support it? So in that case, your professional really needs to match what you want that process to be.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up because so many, often clients will come to us and say, we talk to them about the different processes. They say they want to do collaborative. Um, and then they mention it to their their spouse who goes out and starts talking to attorneys, and they find an attorney who says, "Oh, I am collaborative. I can be collaborative."
It's like, I play nice in the sandbox. Like, well, you might be the most lovely person on earth, but you really have to know how to do this process.
They don't know what it means to negotiate on interests instead of positions. They
Yeah,
don't know what it means to advocate without being adversarial. They just don't work that way. It's not, in their day-to-day life, they haven't been trained. So there's nothing, they're not bad. They're just not collaboratively trained. And it's a very
right.
different process. So I love that, find out the right collaborative lawyer for you if you're going to choose that process. Interview the different professionals that they recommend, interview the CDFA. So if you're interviewing a CDFA when you're picking your professionals, any tips that you have for what people should be asking about or asking you? What do you like to be asked or what would yeah.
I have a whole brochure on this and a whole chapter in my book about how to talk to professionals. But I'll try to condense it, or people can reach out and I'll send that to them.
Okay.
Um, when you're interviewing a CDFA, I think some of the important things to think about or realize as you're talking to them is, are they speaking to you in a way that's respectful, that you can understand? Are they using a lot of jargon? Is there a feeling of cooperation both with you and other professionals? Or is it kind of, I'm the boss of this and just take what I say? You're really looking for people, whoever, whether it's your coach, a CDFA, a therapist, a guardian ad litem, it takes a village sometimes. People you feel, Yale aside, because you don't pick that, um, have your back. You have a good relationship with, you're comfortable with. I can't tell you the number of times I've had people come to me and be like, I'm afraid to ask my attorney questions. Like, you don't want that. You want to be able to trust your attorney and ask them questions. That being said, they're not your therapist.
Yes.
So if you need a therapist on your team, get a therapist. If you need a coach, get a coach, and they can help you manage the process and communications and streamline your thinking.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily need your attorney as a thought partner when you're figuring out who the kids spend Christmas with. Not a legal matter per se, but you might really need to talk things through. That might be a coach. So it's, again, looking at your array of needs and figuring out, who do you need on your team? Sometimes people balk because it's like, oh my gosh, it's going to be expensive. It's much less expensive to have people staying in their lane,
Yeah.
doing what they can do. I can do finances way more quickly than a lot of other professions because that's what I do every day. But I'm not an attorney and I should not be giving legal advice, practicing the law, any of that. Like, you need an attorney to do that stuff. So if we're all staying in our lanes as professionals, you're spending less money.
Yeah. It's money well spent. You're spend the money for the financial advice from the CDFA, get the coaching from the coach, use a lawyer for the law, for the drafting, for the exploration of, explaining what the outcomes could be for
We're
you and how.
safeguarding so you have a resilient agreement and there's not a big oopsie that you're going to find out about in 2 years or 3 years and it costs you a lot.
Exactly. I just,
Or you revisit.
we reach out to clients at the 1 year mark or so, and we, uh, check in. How you doing after you've been divorced about a year? How you doing? And I just reached out to someone this week, and he said, things are going as well as they can go. my wife isn't still not responding in a timely way, but we have an agreement. The agreement is really structured, and
Uh-huh.
we know what to do when we don't get the response. When she doesn't respond, our agreement talked about what can I make these decisions anyway. So sometimes clients want to push back. We don't need all that in our agreement. We'll
Yeah.
be fine. And it was so wonderful to read that all the work we put into this agreement, it's helped them to have a better relationship because they're not fighting. It says right there what they have to do.
Right.
And it takes work to get there. But if you need it, if you have a high conflict relationship, please take your attorneys and your other professionals' advice about what terms you need to really discuss to keep this out of court in the future. We've done this before.
Right. And it gives them a roadmap because either they haven't done it before or they have, but with a different spouse in a different time, in a different life. So it still needs its own set of rules.
Yeah, that's right. Well, thank you so much for talking with us today. So, as you know, I end all our podcast episodes with a question: What's your one better divorce tip? So, what would you say to our listeners about that?
I'd go back to the 3 Ps. And I think the most important is know your purpose. Like, figure out what your true north is and go back to it. If it needs adjusted, adjust it. But if it doesn't, and you're walking through making all these decisions that are really meaningful, tread back. Am I on target? Am I serving my purpose? Am I sticking to my goals? Or did I get caught up in stuff because, my spouse is now dating my spouse is now dating someone and it threw me for a loop. And now my decisions are going to be reactive. If you can be clear on your purpose and use that as your measurement for the decisions that you're making, does it serve you and your purpose moving forward? I think that leads to better resolution.
All right. Great tip. Go back to your purpose, know where you're headed, so you don't get pushed off track by life. That is happening.
Because it will continue to happen.
Yes, of course, hopefully.
Yep.
So, all right. So, Brenda, what's the best way for someone to find you, reach out to you, get information that you offered, and find your book?
So the book is easy, and then not so. So the book is on Amazon. It's oh shit, I'm getting divorced. There's a story behind that. Call me and I'll tell you. So you can do Amazon for a Kindle book or a hard copy. Or what I've also found is if people share an Amazon account and they don't want it to show on their Amazon account because they're just starting to look into this for themselves, they might not have talked to their spouse yet, you can contact the office and we will send you one or send you an electronic copy.
Great.
To reach us, it's Bridging Divorce Solutions, and information is there. If you want to set up a call, there's a button you can use to set up a clarity call, and we might not be the right people for you, but we'll try to get you to the right people and just help you walk through this really hard thing in a better way.
It's wonderful. And you're so lucky with that name, to be able to name your company. Such a perfect name for your
It
company.
was pretty straightforward. I didn't have to get too creative.
I love it. bridgingdivorcesolutions.com. All right. Well, thank you again.
Thank you.
Wonderful to have you here. So if you enjoyed today's episode, please like and subscribe. This will help others who are seeking a better divorce to find us. And this has been another episode of A Better Divorce Podcast. We'll see you on the next episode. You've been tuning in to another episode of A Better Divorce Podcast with Andrea Vacca. Thank you for subscribing, leaving your positive comments and reviews, and sharing the show with others. You can watch episodes at vaccalaw.com, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook. And you can listen through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and more. Bye for now, and remember, you can have a better divorce.